Good evening. Apologize for the slight delay. We're having a couple of technical problems, but hopefully will be fixed. My name is Greg Schaller, and it's my privilege to welcome you to tonight's event hosted by the Centennial Institute here at Colorado Christian University. We are honored to have each of you here and grateful that you were able to brave the nasty weather, and let's hope it doesn't get much worse while we're in here. Before we begin, let me share a bit about the mission of the Centennial Institute and why we are passionate about the work we do. Founded in 2009, the Centennial Institute is Colorado Christian University's public policy think tank. Our mission is to advance faith, family, and freedom grounded in the timeless principles of the Bible and the founding ideals of our nation. We exist to champion the truth and provide a platform for thoughtful conversations on the most pressing social, cultural, and political issues of our time. Through conferences, lectures, policy initiatives, and publications, we seek to equip leaders and citizens to stand for biblical values in all areas of life. At the heart of our work is a deep belief that public policy must be rooted in enduring moral truths. We strive to influence the public square with courage, clarity, and civility, always working to engage with both conviction and compassion. Tonight's event is another example of our ongoing efforts to bring vital discussions to the forefront. As we hear from thought leaders and engage in open dialogue, we invite you to join us in thinking critically and biblically about the challenges and opportunities we face in our nation and beyond. So thank you again for being here with us this evening. A big portion of our mission is raising up the next generation of leaders. Part of that includes providing students here on campus with opportunities to participate with our programming and to learn from our guests. Tonight we have 3 such future leaders, students here at Colorado Christian University to assist me in kicking off tonight's program. These include Caleb Constantio, a politics major, who will open us in prayer, followed by Hannah Coughlin, music education major, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Although I'm noticing we may not have a flag. Following that, Dr. Sweeting will give a few introductory remarks, and then Madeline Ritter, a psychology and criminal justice major, will introduce this evening's speaker. So let's get started.
If you would please join me in prayer. Dear Lord God, I thank you for this evening. I thank you for your great love and kindness that you have shown to us. May you bless this evening and cover it with your presence tonight. May you also bless our speaker and continue to be with him as he spreads and demonstrates the love that he has for the nation of Israel. May eyes be open tonight and hearts be stirred in what is happening to Israel and our world today. Furthermore, may the audience tonight be encouraged even more so to support and pray for the people of Israel. Continue to protect Israel by your presence and by your mighty hand, O Lord, and may you fill the hearts and minds of the people of Israel with your peace and with your comfort. Go before this evening, and may it cause us to have an even greater love for the nation of Israel. In Jesus' name, amen.
Please stand with me if you are able to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. Well, good evening, everybody. We are so glad you're here tonight. Welcome to the first event of Israel Week at Colorado Christian University. Israel Week at an American university. Imagine that. CCU is cutting a whole different course than Barnard College or Columbia, if you've been watching the news this week. From our beginning, way back in 1914, CCU and its heritage schools have long recognized that the Jewish people have had and continue to have a special place in God's unfolding plan for the world. Our heritage schools, like Denver Bible Institute, Western Bible College, Rockmont College, Colorado Christian College, our heritage schools have had a special love for and interest in the Jewish people, and they're being restored to their homeland. We've wanted to be a blessing to the Jewish people. This continued under the presidency of Bill Armstrong, who this building was named after. It continued under my own presidency, and now under the presidency of Eric Hogue, who's been a vocal, outspoken voice in our country condemning the recent upsurge in anti-Semitism. So you ask, why are we doing Israel Week at CCU? A number of reasons come to mind. First of all, at a time where we've seen this eruption of anti-Semitism around the world, especially on college campuses, we again want to affirm our support for the Jewish people. We want to remind, secondly, our own community and the Denver community of the unique story of the Jewish people from biblical times as God's chosen people until today. This has largely been forgotten in our country and in our nation's universities. Thirdly, we want to remind people how the Jewish people were called to be and have been a light to the nations. It was President John Adams who said that the Hebrews have done more to civilize men than any other nation. Fourth, we also want to remind our community of the Jewish roots of the Christian faith, the Jewish heritage of the church. We want our students to be aware that the fact that 77% of our scriptures is the Hebrew scriptures we call the Old Testament. And we want students also to learn about modern Israel, the miracle of its regathering, the resilient survival of the Jewish people amidst the many attempts to destroy them. We want them to know that the Jewish state is not only our best ally and the sole democracy in the Middle East, but today it is the guardian of most of the world's Jews. And so, bottom line, we want to be a blessing to the Jewish people. So, welcome to Israel Week at Colorado Christian University. Here's what's happening this week. Tonight, we're so pleased to have Joel Rosenberg and his wife Lynn with us, and he'll be introduced in a moment. Tomorrow in chapel at CCU, the students will be hearing from Dr. Jeff Myers. Dr. Myers is president of Summit Ministries, but he recently wrote a book, Should Christians Support Israel? And he'll be speaking on that topic to our students. Then on Wednesday, we're so pleased to have Dr. Matthew Levitt, the former senior fellow of the Washington Institute, director of the Jeanette and Ellie Reinhard program on counterterrorism and intelligence, speak. It's at 12 noon at the Armstrong Center here on Iran's playbook in 2025 as it regards Israel and the United States. And then on Thursday, students will be hearing in our chapel from Dr. Michael Rydelnik. Dr. Rydelnik is a national radio host on the Moody Broadcasting Network, Open Line. He's also the dean of the Jewish Studies program at the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago, and he's the son of Holocaust survivors. Students and those who gather with us, we're in for a great week to remind ourselves of very important things. But before we go any further, I'd like to invite Madeline Ritter to come and introduce tonight's speaker.
Thank you. Tensions between Ukraine and the Trump administration hit a fever pitch last week as their war with Russia continues to rage. China continues to be a formidable economic and political threat, and tensions between Israel and Iran are ever present. Global politics seem to be at a tipping point, and here to enlighten us on these pressing issues is Joel C. Rosenberg. Mr. Rosenberg is a best-selling author of multiple political thrillers, and they all have 5 million books in print. Joel's next literary project is an exciting political thriller, The Beijing Betrayal, which will become available to purchase on March 11th. Fiction is not his only talent, as he is the founder and editor-in-chief of All Israel News and All Arab News. These outlets provide original reporting and exclusive interviews with a target audience of evangelical Christians around the globe. Joel and his wife, Lynn, not only talk the talk, but walk the walk as the founders of the Joshua Fund, which since 2006 has raised $100 million to strengthen the church in the Israel and Arab world, empowering them to serve the poor and needy in the name of Jesus. Given Mr. Rosenberg's background, he is in a unique position to provide important insights on the current international landscape from an evangelical perspective. Will you please join me in welcoming Mr. Joel C. Rosenberg?
Good evening. What a joy to be with you guys. I know you probably thought it was Joel Osteen that was coming, and you got mistaken. So, but you're here now. It's got a big snowstorm coming. You're probably thinking, oh gosh, I can't even get out now. But it's an honor. I'm glad anyone showed. What a joy to be here at CCU. Actually, my first political thriller was immediately dismissed by the former president of CCU, who was friends with my parents, Larry Donathorn and his wife, and my parents gave him a copy of The Last Jihad. This was a long time ago, like 23 years ago, and okay, it's not a big deal. He just wasn't that interested, and I'm sympathetic, but his wife found it interesting, and so she wanted to take it on the vacation that they were leaving for the next day, and he's like, whatever, you take it. But his mind was elsewhere. But as they got on I-70 driving to DIA, she started to read the first page. The first sentence was, "A presidential motorcade is a fascinating sight, especially at night and especially from the air." And what was happening was a kamikaze attack was coming onto the presidential motorcade, an Air Force One that had just landed at DIA, and it was all going to take place on I-70 and the junction coming into Pena Boulevard and DIA, and that got his attention. And suddenly he was electrified by this novel, and they read it through their whole vacation. Then they FedExed it to their son, who was an F-16 weapons systems officer in Afghanistan, and he started sharing it around his whole squadron, and then very graciously sent me a note to say, "I love the novel. If you need any help in future novels on any Air Force terminology, happy to help." And I apparently had really blown it on some things, but he was very gracious and was very helpful on a future novel. And that was my first connection to CCU. My parents lived for 30 plus years here in Lakewood, and so that's how we got connected. And I couldn't seem to persuade any of my 4 sons to come here, but that's partly because we moved to Israel, became dual U.S.-Israeli citizens, and they went into the Army instead. So that was, it's not entirely their fault, but we were rooting for CCU in those years. I do want to just say that, whatever was said there was just a little too nice. I want to be clear that I really am a failed political consultant. That really is my resume. In fact, when she was asking me, what is there anything I may have missed? I said, yeah, just you can get rid of all of that. Just put failed political consultant. Because every single person that I ever worked for in politics lost. 100% failure rate. And you're laughing because it's not your resume. It wouldn't seem that funny if it was. I'm also, and I'm not kidding, I worked for Jack Kemp and Bill Bennett when they started a think tank in Washington, D.C. We thought it was going to be the Kemp-Bennett presidential run. Then Kemp decided not to run. I said, no problem, Bennett will run. But then Bennett didn't run. And then Steve Forbes, the businessman, editor-in-chief of Forbes magazine, who was the chairman of the whole thing, said, you got to be kidding me. What have we been doing this for? So he decided to run. And then he hired me, and I helped him lose 2 presidential campaigns and about $70 million of his 5 daughters' inheritance money. And I was pretty much off to the races, as it were. And my last candidate that I ever worked for was Benjamin Netanyahu. It was 2000. He had been prime minister from 1996 to 1999. He lost his reelection and then put together a comeback campaign team in the fall of 2000. That's what I was on. Junior guy, I don't want to overstate it, and it was only for a few months. But guess how long it took him to come back? 9 years. I played no useful role whatsoever. Now, you're still laughing, but the thing is, I was on Pat Buchanan's TV show on MSNBC. They canceled it the next day. That would be maybe a one-off, except that I was on Mike Huckabee's show on Fox, and he resigned that night. And when Lynn and I moved to Virginia, it was a red state. When we left for Israel, it was dark blue. It's red again. So I'm not saying that it's all my fault, but this is where I turn to making things up for a living. Because I'm also one of the few Jews that were born here in the United States that didn't get the financial gene. Okay, I'm not your CPA, I'm not your stockbroker, I'm not your hedge fund manager. Okay, wasn't going to ever happen for me. And I'm not your doctor, your lawyer, your chiropractor. I don't run a motion picture studio. I didn't get any of the good Jewish jobs, and I'm still a little bit bitter, and I think that comes out. So I gotta temper that. But that's really why I decided to go into novel writing, because I thought I can make things up. That I can do that. And I tell my journalist friends, it is not unethical to write fake news. But you have to own it, right? There is a job for this. It's called being a novelist, right? If you want to be a political thriller writer, fine. Then you can write fake news. You can write tomorrow's headlines that are totally made up. Right? Every quote out of every person's mouth, you can make it up. That's fine. But you have to be honest about it. And so that first novel, The Last Jihad, was my foray into, well, maybe I should do something else with my life. My wife did say, you might want to ease into the pool, right? Have you ever written a novel? No. Do you read many novels? No. Did you go to school to write novels? I did not. Do you have an idea? I do not. So, we do have 3 kids at the time. We now have 4 sons. We did not get the spiritual gift of raising teenage daughters. So the Lord must have looked at us and gone, I don't think that's going to be a good idea. So anyway, but that first novel was called The Last Jihad. And I'm going to say it to give you a little bit of context of what we're talking about tonight. What we're talking about tonight is just how serious is the threat posed by Russia, Communist China, and the Iranian regime to the United States, to Israel, to the church. These are big issues. Bigger now, I think, than almost any time since the worst years of the Cold War. And we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to leave some time for questions. So I'm going to go for about 40, and then we're going to have 20 to 30 minutes of Q&A. So if you've got some Qs, we'll have microphones here, and you can ask. I don't know that I'll have any A's, but I can make them up. And so start cooking. But I just again some context. So that first novel I started writing in January of 2001. Okay, now that timing is important because I just helped Steve Forbes, that had been years before. I helped Steve Forbes lose the second campaign in 2000. Then in the fall of 2000, I was helping Benjamin Netanyahu go nowhere with his life. And then in January 2001, I was unemployed, and that's where I said, all right, let's just sit down. And when you sit at a computer and you try to start writing a novel, you just see the cursor, and it's just daring you. Go ahead, fill me up with 100,000 words. It's a weird job, right? Jerry Jenkins is here. God bless him. The man sold 65 million copies of one novel series. It has nothing to do with all the rest of the great work that he's done. But that man knows how to fill up, a computer with stuff that people will read. I was sitting there going, I don't know that I can do this, right? And that's why the word curse is right in there, because it's just like daring you, cursing you. You can't do this. You can't do. And a novelist is a weird job. You're trying to persuade people to spend $28 and several days of their lives on something that's completely made up. Why would anyone do this? I don't know. I'm grateful. Now, I'm Jewish, so I wouldn't pay retail, but I'm grateful for you, that do, right? God bless you. So when I was sitting there thinking, I want to change my careers, I want to get out of politics because I'm no good at it, and write a political thriller. So I didn't really have an idea, and I didn't have any characters, and I didn't have a plot. Other than that, I was really excited about this opportunity, and no one was paying me to do this. Anyway, long story short, the first page puts you inside the cockpit of a plane, a business jet that's been hijacked by radical Islamist terrorists, coming in on a kamikaze attack mission into an American city. That's how the book opens. And it leads my fictional American president to decide to declare war on Saddam Hussein, to remove him from power because Saddam is funding terrorism and has used chemical weapons against his own people. What might he do against Israel? What might he do against the United States and our allies around the world? That was the premise. Now, when I sat there in January of 2001, I did not think, I got to get this done quickly, because Osama bin Laden is going to start this in motion on September 11th. I was not predicting the future. I was trying to write a novel that might also get turned into a movie. It never did, so that's a separate issue and more bitterness, but that's okay. That's how it began. And, no one had ever heard of me. No one had ever heard of my novel. So, it's one thing to write the novel. Another thing, then if a tree falls in the woods in order to be pulped make a book, and nobody knows that it fell, and nobody knows that it was turned into a book, how useful is that? Somehow somebody's got to hear about that tree that fell and was turned into a book, and that's a very difficult thing. As it happens, lightning did strike. Sean Hannity got very excited about the book. He and I were friends, and he had me on radio, and he had me on television. That was day one, and the book started to take off. And the next morning, the first show that nobody knew how to, my PR team didn't know how to book me on any shows because nobody had ever heard of me, and no one had ever heard of the book. And so they were really struggling. So they went to an acid rock station in my hometown of Rochester, New York. And they said, hey, there's this guy that grew up here, and he's got this book, and it seems to mirror what might be happening in reality. Anyway, so this guy's name was Brother Wheeze. He was the main morning show host on this acid rock station. I never even listened to it as a kid. But he's like, so he has me on. Okay, so it's Hannity Radio, Hannity Television, that's opening day. Next morning, Wednesday morning, I'm on the Brother Wheeze show, okay? WCMF, rockers, we're rockers. Anyway, I never listened to it. But anyway, the point is, he goes, dude, how did you know? I read this book over the weekend. That's whack, dude. How did you know that people were going to hijack a plane and fly it into a city? That's crazy. That's whack, dude. Where'd that come from? How do you answer that question? I didn't quite know what to say. I said something, and he's like, dude, okay, but seriously, it's one thing to write a novel that opens up with a kamikaze attack on America. Like, dude, that never happened. But then now you're going to go to war with Saddam Hussein? I mean, that's what the whole world's talking about. We might actually go to war in a few months with Saddam Hussein. Dude, how did you know? So I tried to explain my theory of the novel. And he's like, now, dude, are you a Heb? I said, I'm sorry, what? Are you a Hebrew? Are you Jewish? I was like, I'm Jewish on my father's side. My mom's not Jewish. All right, you're fine. You're a Hebrew. And then he goes, I'm Jewish too. I said, Brother Wheeze? I didn't know. I thought he was a Jesuit. So he's like, I don't understand what's going on in this book, dude. Seriously, I read it all weekend. Now, listen, you got these characters. They're starting to wonder what's going to happen when I die. What happens after you die? They start talking about Jesus. I mean, dude, what are you, a born again? An evangelical? He said it like it was the most disgusting concept that he had ever heard of. And again, I'm flabbergasted. This is my third radio show, second radio show, third interview on this book. And I'm like, he's like, do you actually believe in Jesus? I said, yes, sir, I do. Got that out anyway. That was good. He's like, I don't understand. How can you be Jewish and believe in Jesus? I'm like, this is interview 3? Oh my gosh. I said, well, Mr. Wheeze, I don't know. We have time to get into all that on your show. He goes, are you kidding? I'm going to hold you over the break here, son. It's one thing to meet a novelist who predicts the future, but to meet a Jew who believes in Jesus, this I got to hear, son. And we were off to the races. Like that question became the dominant question on almost every single interview I've done, certainly for that tour. That book hit #1 on Amazon, 11 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, and mostly it gave me an opportunity to talk about the threat of radical Islam to the United States, to Israel, to our Arab allies. But it began to sort of create a platform for me. It wasn't true that I was a psychic or a clairvoyant or a prophet. I said I run a nonprofit, but nevertheless, people seem to want to know why I write novels that seem to predict the future, because that became a pattern. A few years ago, I wrote the first in a series that is winding up this month with the Beijing Betrayal. That comes out March 11th. It's the last in a series of 6 novels, the first of which was called The Kremlin Conspiracy. Now, The Kremlin Conspiracy was written several months, or published several years before Vladimir Putin decided to invade Ukraine. But the premise of the novel is that a dictator rises to power in Moscow and is trying to decide whether to invade Ukraine or the 3 NATO Baltic countries of Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania. I'm actually working on the movie script of that right now. There's a production deal on that, so we'll see. But that was weird. That was just one more in these novels. Again, I am not predicting the future. But I do study our worst enemies, America's worst enemies, Israel's worst enemies, civilization's worst enemies. I do. I spend a lot of time reading their work and studying their speeches and watching their videos, and then I believe them. That's what makes me different. I believe that these people mean this, and then I project forward. I extrapolate what might they do if U.S. and other Western leaders are not paying attention, and they try to go pull off the most evil things that they're cooking up in their caves or in their palaces or whatever. I think that's why the novels have had an uncanny way of seeming to foreshadow future headlines. It's not a supernatural gift. The Lord may have added a little touch of something to draw attention to it, because I also try to weave the gospel into these novels. I figured, well, if I'm going to fail at something, at least maybe someone will have some spiritual hook that might cause them to think about their own lives. I used to love Tom Clancy novels, but everybody was dying or at risk of death, and I never saw anybody seem to care about that or care about what their own personal future would hold. That's difficult to do, as Jerry can tell you. You can't write a political thriller and just drop in a Billy Graham crusade in the middle of it. It just, it has to be very organic, or it's not going to work. It's already the fact that I don't have gratuitous sex or any sex in my novels, gratuitous or not. I've already lost half the market. I don't have vulgarity, so people are expecting this when they read. I'm competing up against all the great political thriller writers of our time, so I'm already multiple strikes out when the public that has an appetite for a certain type of fiction, right? They're not really looking at my books as prophetic fiction or religious fiction. It's competing up against political thrillers. So how do you then weave spiritual themes in and hold people's attention? I find it exciting. I don't always do it as well as I'd like. It's a work in progress. But what it's done over years is it has caused me to think very long and hard about the hook, right? The hook for a political thriller is different. I wouldn't know how to write Pride and Prejudice. Okay? I don't think that way. A political thriller is about a worst case scenario. It has to be a worst case scenario that you think, oh my gosh, Lord, may that never ever happen. And yet, so it has to hook you as something horrible that you might be interested in, but it has to be plausible. It has to be just plausible enough that you think, yeah, how might that play out? That's what a good political thriller ought to do. And then you've got to hook them with the title and the cover and the first line and the first page, but you've got to hold them, because everybody really wants to watch Netflix. They don't want to read your book. Even if they bought it, more likely it was bought for them, and they really don't want to read it, right? So how are you going to, you got to earn it every page. And so I write these short chapters, cliffhanger endings. I write these chapters, they're like Pringles. You can't eat just one of them. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you're like, all right, just one more. I just need to know, and now it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and now you're cursing me on Twitter or on some social media platform that you found, and you're just zinging them at me, and maybe you're saying bless your heart if you're an evangelical, but I know what you mean, and you're furious at me because you're like, I got to get up, I got to work, so this is what I do for a living, and And the Beijing betrayal is the end cap in this, is the bookend, as it were. And it's because one of my sons said, okay, Dad, radical Islam, we get it. Yeah, you've dealt with this a lot. But what about China, as the president would say, China? What about China? We're not going to let China take over the Panama Canal. We'll go get the Panama Canal. We didn't give it to the Chinese. We gave it to the Panamanians, and we're going to get it back. We're going to get back. We're not going to let China drive fentanyl into our country. We're going to build a border wall. We're going to slap 25% tariffs. We're going to make America great again, and it's not going to involve China. Okay, it's not going to happen. Not on my watch. We're going to take Greenland. We're going to take Panama, and then we'll move from there. Okay, you understand? And we're going to. By the way, we're going to make Gaza great again. Okay. Now, Gaza was never great. Gaza was never great, but we're going to make it great again. We're going to take it, we're going to own it, we're going to rebuild it, and it's going to be fantastic. You will never have seen a Gaza like this. It's going to be so beautiful. I'm telling you, there's going to be Trump Tower, there's going to be Gaza al Largo, we're going to have golf courses. We only need 18 holes, and we've got a lot of holes in Gaza right now, so I'm just saying. We're going to have boardwalks, we're going to have skee ball, it's going to be fantastic, funnel cakes, and it's just, you will never see a Gaza like this. You will be vacationing in Disney Gaza very, very soon, and I promise you. And you know it's true, it's going to be fantastic. So, what's happening in our world right now is moving so fast. It is hard to write political thrillers crazier than what's happening in the real world. I wrote a whole novel about Gaza. I did not imagine Donald Trump deciding to redecorate. It never dawned on me. So you try to be as creative as you can, but then sometimes you need to back up and say, maybe just let the world take a spin for itself. I'm trying to add a little bit of humor, because these are very hard topics, but let's take a few moments and talk about where we are with China and with Russia. That's Zelensky. I could not believe what happened in my office. Did you see it? It was unbelievable. I'm not against him, but I'm just saying that was something. We're going to talk about China, we're going to talk about Russia, we're going to talk about Iran. And by definition, we're going to talk about a lot about Israel. I'm a dual citizen, as I mentioned. And I have been dual citizens of Israel for 11 years. That means we get to vote twice. It's like living in Chicago. And so and you don't have to be dead. You don't have to be dead. So that's good. 2 of our sons have served in the Israeli army, and another one's being drafted. And so we're all in. And that what happened on October 7th we were there, and we have not only covered it as journalists, but also we have a nonprofit organization, the Joshua Fund, that blesses Israel and her neighbors in the name of Jesus, providing humanitarian relief, strengthening the local church. Israelis, yes. Palestinians, yes. Lebanese, yes. Syrians, Jordanians, Iraqis, Egyptians, yes. Because God doesn't just love Israel. He doesn't just love the Jewish people. He does, and most of the world does not. Fortunately, most evangelicals do, and I'm very grateful that CCU does, and has taken a stand for Israel over its entire existence. That's partly how I connected with Larry Donafort at the time, Don Sweeting, Eric now. I'm very grateful that this is one of the outposts that, didn't turn against the Jews like Columbia and Harvard and every place else where, the smart kids seem to go. Really? Smart and wisdom, knowledge and wisdom don't necessarily go together. And I'm grateful for CCO because they're training smart kids, but with wisdom, with biblical wisdom. And so if you're an investor here, please keep going, and thank you. If you're not, please start, okay? We're in a moment where the previous administration, under President Biden, projected such weakness that the world's worst actors started making calculations. Were they going to go get what they wanted under the Biden term? Okay. Now, it all began in Afghanistan. When President Biden decided to pull all U.S. forces out of Afghanistan, as we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and the entire national security establishment, including most Democrats, said, Mr. President, don't do that. The Afghan government and the Afghan military just isn't ready. I wish they were after 20 years, but they're not. If you pull the Jenga stick out of the game will collapse, and you will have lost Afghanistan after a 20-year investment. The president was absolutely convinced that he knew better. He'd been in the Senate for 50 years, right? He'd been the vice president. He was the president of the United States. He knew the rest of the world were idiots. He pulled the Jenga stick out. The game collapsed. When that happened, as humiliating and horrifying as that was, a lot of other things started happening. The first thing that happened was Tsar Putin decided this is the moment. This is the moment that that Biden's a snowflake. He will melt in the heat. I do not need to worry about his response if I go take Ukraine. And so that's what he did. Now Putin has lost 800,000 troops. He's got North Korean troops fighting for him now. He's humiliated. He's bankrupting the country. He's forcing young men to go to the front, and they're just being slaughtered. Now, Ukraine has lost a lot too. But where we are is a moment where when President Trump, look, you have to understand that I was a never Trumper until 4 days before this 2016 election, okay? I just, you like it, you don't like it, I don't really care. I just want to tell you that, put my cards on the table. I wasn't a fan. I was very concerned about him in 2016, but I decided, me personally, I'm a personal friend of Mike and Karen Pence. You can hate me for that, but I don't really care about that either. I believe in loyalty to friendships. He was a fan, as was Karen, of my novels, and I thought, am I really going to vote against a ticket where at least somebody on the ticket likes my books? That's my plan. I knew I was against Hillary, and I believed that she would do everything that she promised. That was the problem. I didn't believe that Donald Trump would do anything that he promised, like all his conservative promises, and that's why I was reluctant. But in the end, I had to send in my absentee ballot, so I voted for him. So why do I say that? I say that because when I was in the Oval Office with him, and he's like, Joe, tell me, did Mike Pence just call you an evangelical? Are you an evangelical? I said, yes, sir. You believe in Jesus? Yes, sir. But isn't your name Rosenberg? Yes, sir. Well, isn't that Jewish? Well, it is, sir. My father's side is Jewish. My mother's side's not Jewish. All right, that's Jewish. Listen, I don't understand. How can you be Jewish and believe in Jesus? I'm not kidding. This was my first ever meeting in the Oval Office, first ever meeting with him, and it was like meeting Jimmy Fallon. You just wanted to swirl his hair. Like it didn't seem real. And he's actually talking like this. Joe, are you really an evangelical? I'm like, oh my gosh, Lord, this is the same question that Brother Weeze asked me. Wow, what a fun opportunity to share with him. But we talked about a lot of national security issues throughout that. But my point is, Donald Trump says that that Putin never would have invaded Ukraine if he had remained president. I believe that. I don't believe every tweet. I don't believe every statement. But that's true. There were no wars, no major wars in the world started on Trump's watch. In fact, he brokered 4 Arab-Israeli peace agreements that were a great benefit to my country, Israel. But Putin saw he had an opportunity, and he took it. Now, he thought it was going to go fast. It did not. But I will tell you, I am worried. When Donald Trump said to Zelensky, I mean, I support overall Zelensky fighting for his country. I don't support him getting in a fight with the President of the United States and the Vice President on global television. That was insane. I don't know what Zelensky was smoking before he went into the Oval Office, but he did great damage to his country. There are 2 people, actually only one, that you need on your side if you plan to survive Tsar Putin, and that's Donald J. Trump. And he did not play his cards well. Putin is the most dangerous man on the planet. Now, the second most dangerous is the Ayatollah Khamenei, because who was the next person to decide, you know what? Looking around, Biden, Harris, snowflakes. It's time to launch a seventh front attack against Israel. Now's the time. And this is what happened. This is what we've been suffering. More Jews killed in one day than any day since the Holocaust. Now, I believe Joe Biden genuinely loves Israel. When he calls himself a Zionist, I believe him. But I think that incompetence mixed with hubris is a very dangerous cocktail. I think he genuinely believes that he's the smartest man in every room, and he's genuinely been proven wrong over the years. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. Joel, you're just making things up. You're just being, no. Consider two of Biden's closest friends. One was the former Secretary of Defense, a Republican, but who served in the Obama administration. Bob, and I'm totally blanking on the last name right now. Somebody will remember. Gates, Bob Gates. Bob Gates famously said, I love Joe Biden. If I had a personal crisis, the first person I'd call would be Joe Biden. But Joe Biden, when it comes to national security, has been wrong on every issue for the last 40 years. That's one of his closest friends. And his other close friend, Barack Obama. You've heard of him? President of the United States, who said, never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to F up any foreign policy situations. That's the guy who chose him to be the vice president. I know it's a Christian college, but I'm just quoting as close as I could so you understand. I'm not making this stuff up. Those two men were right on those two issues. Biden has done irreparable, well, I shouldn't say irreparable, nothing's irreparable with God, but tremendous damage to American national security and to the national security of all our allies. Now, the one country that didn't move, you could say two, let's set aside North Korea for this conversation, okay? We can only cover so much in the time we have. But you can ask about North Korea if you want. We can talk about Little Rocket Man, but for the moment, let's talk about Communist China. So, and by the way, this is the book that is coming out on the 11th, The Beijing Betrayal. The Beijing Betrayal is basically the story of my hero for all 6 books is a former Marine, served in Afghanistan and in Iraq in combat tours, decorated, wounded multiple times in combat. Where is he from? Hannah? Hannah, where are you? Monument, Colorado. Absolutely. Hannah's from Monument. And I was asking her backstage, this was before she came out, and I said, so where are you from? And she said, Monument, Colorado. I said, oh my gosh, that's a population of like 3,000 or something. I don't know. It's really quite small. But Marcus Riker is from Monument. He's a front ranger, loves climbing 14ers, whitewater rafting, jumping out of planes, usually with a parachute. And then he joins the Marines because he sees 9/11, and he's just finishing up school out here at UNC Greeley. And then he marries his college or high school sweetheart from Monument, and he goes on after the service. After the Marines, he becomes a U.S. Secret Service agent. And I won't tell you the whole story because you'll have to read the series. But the point is, now he's in the CIA. And this series, starting with the Kremlin conspiracy right up to the Beijing betrayal, walks through everything I'm saying tonight. It takes a little longer in the novels. But I deal with every national security issue that I most care about, starting with the Russia threat, dealing with North Korea, dealing with Iran, and dealing with Communist China. And what I hear from almost everybody I meet in Washington and many places around the world is that Communist China is our most serious threat. It is certainly a grave and growing threat. But I would argue that the Communist China, as serious a threat as they are, they're not yet the most serious. And I would just say the reason I draw that conclusion is they haven't invaded any countries yet. I mean, not recently, right? Russia has, starting with the Republic of Georgia in 2008, and then obviously Crimea and Eastern Donbass and obviously Syria, and they've sent troops to Libya, and now the full-blown invasion of Ukraine. And that's a serious problem. Iran has been sending terrorists into countries all over the world, and now has attacked Israel over the last 17 months from 7 directions. What did President Biden do? He said he was for us. He flew Air Force One, to his credit, into Israel in the early weeks of the war. Even President Trump never flew Air Force One into a hot missile zone in a hot war. Biden did it. Good for him. Gave us aid, gave us support at the beginning, and then banned Netanyahu from coming to the White House. Stopped sending us weapons. Stopped resupplying us, even with weapons that he had signed, that Congress had already, voted for the money to resupply us during a 7-front war. Refused to let Netanyahu into the White House. Who's the first person that Donald Trump invites to the White House when he gets into office? The guy who's at war. On 7 fronts, your ally. This isn't rocket science, but it makes Trump look like a genius and a true ally just by comparison. Russia is on the move. Iran is on the move. Both need to be stopped. But the reason President Trump is warning Zelensky, don't get us into World War III. This is very serious. Trump is not wrong about this. Now, he's saying things that make me nervous because it sounds like, in recent days, that he thinks this is somehow, the war is Zelensky's fault. And I think this is what's gotten Zelensky on edge. But Zelensky's reading this wrong. Even if Trump thinks that, which I don't believe he really thinks that. I believe this is a bargaining tactic to get Russia to the table. Trump's trying to pull Russia away from China. I don't know that that's possible. But the point is, if you have one country in the world that you need on your side, don't go pick a fight on global television in the Oval Office. But the reason Trump is warning, remonstrating, Volodymyr Zelensky, you're driving us to World War III, is because I believe Tsar Putin is this close to using tactical nuclear weapons. Putin is being humiliated. He did not see the resolve of the Ukrainians. He did not see the sleeping NATO powers sort of finally waking up and at least trying to help. He didn't even think that Biden would do as much as he did. But Biden wasn't helping Ukraine to win. Europe and the U.S. under Biden were helping Ukraine not lose. And there's a difference. They were terrified of Ukraine winning. They shouldn't have been. But at the heart of it is the same concern that Trump has. Vladimir Putin has a card that he has not used, but he threatened to use. I believe Putin. Is he a liar? Sure. Is he a monster? Absolutely. But in this case, I believe him when he says he wants to use, that he's willing to use nuclear weapons. Because he's losing. And losing is not in his lexicon. He doesn't know what to do with losing. It's humiliating, and he risks assassination. I'll give you a little hint in case you're curious about the Kremlin conspiracy. The son-in-law of my Russian dictator becomes more and more horrified. He marries in to the family. He marries the president's only daughter. He doesn't understand that he's marrying into the Godfather's family. And over time, he becomes more and more horrified by this Russian dictator, and then realizes, oh my gosh, this guy is willing to start World War III, and he could destroy Russia. And so the son-in-law in the first book decides the only way to stop his father-in-law is to leak the war plans of the invasion, the imminent invasion, to somebody. He saw Marcus Riker once on television being awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom because of his work as a Secret Service agent. And Marcus happens to be on the detail that's coming to guard a senator that's there in Russia. So I won't give that all away, but the point being, leaking the plans isn't enough. And so at one point, this son-in-law says to Marcus Riker, everything you learn to protect your president, teach me, because I need to take the life of mine. That's how scared he is by where his father-in-law is taking his country. I don't know if Oleg Kraskin exists in Russia today, but I believe there's a madman on the loose in Moscow, and I believe we are dangerously close to nuclear war. If that weren't bad enough, Russia's main ally in the Middle East is the Iranian regime. I don't think we need to get into too much detail there. We're going to take questions in just a moment, but we've been dealing with the Iranian threat since 1979, and Israel is on the front line of Western civilization. And we were being told by President Biden last May, a year ago May, surrender. Now, he didn't use those words. He said, accept a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, and then you'll get all your hostages out, and then you withdraw from Gaza, and it's over. Prime Minister Netanyahu said, with respect, Mr. President, I can't do that. Yes, I want all of our hostages out. But a permanent ceasefire in Gaza is surrender to a terrorist organization that has already publicly vowed to do October 7th again and again and again until they kill all of us. And Prime Minister Netanyahu said, no, I can't accept that. This is how he got banned from the White House. This is how millions of Israelis took to the streets to demand Netanyahu stand down or retire, resign, quit. I'm not here to defend everything that Prime Minister Netanyahu has done, but I will tell you, at that time, when President Biden was telling Netanyahu to effectively surrender, what was true and what wasn't true. Just real quickly. Yahya Sinwar, the demon-possessed mastermind of October 7th, the Hamas leader in Gaza, was still alive in May of last year. His right-hand man, Mohammed Death, the military commander of all the Hamas terror forces, was still alive. Ismail Haniyeh, the political leader of Hamas, living in luxury in a high-rise in Doha, the capital of Qatar, the two-faced American-Iranian ally in the Gulf of Qatar, he was still alive. And 60% of Hamas forces were still intact. And Biden was saying surrender. Netanyahu said no. Now, at that time, Biden was running for president. Netanyahu didn't know he wasn't going to finish the race. He didn't know Harris was going to run. And he didn't know Trump was going to win. But he said, I can't have my legacy be that I blew it on October 7th, didn't see this coming, and then surrendered. Even if that's knuckling under to my most important most important ally in the world, the President of the United States. He did it. He didn't get in a firefight with him in the Oval Office, mind you. He respectfully said, I heard what you said, but I respectfully can't go there. And look at where we are today. Happy to answer questions. But we're going back to war. You have to understand. We're going back to war in Gaza very, very soon. And it's going to be messy. And people are going to die. Israelis are going to die. Palestinians are going to die. But we have to win this war. We're dealing with genocidal, demon-possessed monsters. I believe Gaza is under judgment, biblical judgment. You cannot curse Israel and the Jewish people for 8 decades in defiance of Genesis 12:3. I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. You can't curse Israel and the Jewish people for 8 decades and not suffer judgment. In 2005, 20 years ago, Israel completely withdrew from Gaza. No soldiers, no civilians, no Jewish graves anymore. The prime minister at the time, the prime minister of Israel said, you guys have beachfront property. You have trillions of cubic feet of natural gas right off your beaches. You have smart, industrious people. Go build a Palestinian paradise. And what did they do? They held an election. Did they vote for the moderate, nonviolent, but corrupt Palestinian Authority? They did not. They voted in a government run by Hamas, a genocidal terror group that took all the money of all U.S. and international aid and built a terror base camp to launch October 7th. And they're facing judgment now. I've been in Gaza as a journalist, and I'm telling you, it's an apocalyptic wasteland as far as the eye can see. We should be grieving for the Palestinians. But they're under judgment. Now, I want to say one more thing on that. The people of Nineveh in the book of Jonah, they were under judgment too. They were wicked. They hated Israel. They hated the Jews. They want to kill us all. God said, I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to judge you. Enough. Jonah wouldn't go. Right? Why? Was he scared? No, Jonah wasn't scared. Jonah was afraid, not of the Ninevites. He was afraid that God might forgive them. So when he finally does go, and he preaches just judgment, you don't see any word repentance out of that message for 40 days, 40 nights. And they are guilty, and they are under judgment, imminent judgment. But Jonah's so convincing, but what happens? The people are convicted. And even though they are guilty of sovereign judgment by God, they repent genuinely, and God relents. And then that's when Jonah gets mad. Come on, I knew you'd do that. And what does God say to him? These people don't know their right hand from their left hand. Should I not have compassion on these folks? I'm paraphrasing. Go reread the book of Jonah. The people of Gaza are under judgment, and they deserve it. It's true. But followers of Jesus Christ need to have compassion. We're not in the sovereign judgment business. We are in the preach the gospel business. There is hope for the people of Gaza, just like there is for Israel and for any other nation. We need to find a way, every possible way, to at least let them hear what they're doing and what they're facing, but there is hope in Christ and Christ alone. I don't know if they'll repent. And I don't know if they repent, if God will relent. Individually, yes. As a nation, I don't know. But this is what's going on right now. We are dealing with satanic forces trying to destroy Israel, and we're dealing with biblical judgment now. That's pretty heavy. That's why I began with the humor. And so China, as bad as they are, they're just one more that we have to deal with simultaneously. But they haven't invaded anyone yet. So on that note, let's see if you guys have any questions. If you don't, that's fine. I'll just tell some more jokes or tell some stories, whatever. But you got some microphones here.
So we have about 15, 20 minutes for questions. We do know the difference between commentary and questions. I have a posse of students here who will take the mic away from you, attack if we go into commentary mode and not questions. So we have one over here.
Okay, yes.
Mr. Rosenberg, it's Carl Hoops. 2 questions for you. Number 1, is a nuclear North Korea a serious threat to our allies in the Orient, like a nuclear Iran is to the Middle East and Europe?
So let's start with that one. And the answer is it's a huge threat, and especially if you live anywhere in the Western United States as well. But yes, to our allies. There is a significant difference, and that is, as a communist, as an atheist, the dear leader doesn't believe in an afterlife. So this is where mutual assured destruction worked with the Soviets. Because once you're dead, then you don't all your toys, all your mistresses, all your wealth, it doesn't mean anything. So that's why we need a missile defense system, but we also need a strong Pacific alliance, a very strong Pacific alliance, strong American economy, strong American defense, and you need to create a true strategy of deterrence to keep the North Koreans or anyone else from even trying. The difference with Iran is they're not atheists. They are, in the Iranian regime, these are apocalyptic Islamists. They're not just radical. They don't want to just use violence to achieve their political objectives. They're apocalyptic. They believe that if they commit genocide against Judaism, Israel, and Christendom, the United States, that you will set into motion the coming of their Mahdi, or their 12th Imam, and paradise. And that even if they get nuked or even if they get killed, it doesn't matter. They've got 70 virgins. So you can't use the same deterrent factor with an Iranian regime, such as it is currently, as you would with the North Korean regime. Your second question?
Second question is, Eric Prince, Hillsdale alumnus, former special operator, founder of Blackwater, said that Israel should have flooded the tunnels and go into Gaza faster and harder. President Trump said all the hostages should have been released like a couple of weeks ago, all or nothing, or all hell would break loose. Why have the Israelis been so reluctant to be more aggressive and get this thing over with?
Because our loved ones are in the tunnels. It's not difficult.
Half of them are dead anyway.
But the people that are alive are our mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers. I mean, we have an obligation, a moral compact. If you're an Israeli citizen and you're asleep in your pajamas on a Saturday morning, a Sabbath, and a bloodthirsty, demon-possessed monster comes to get you, we're coming to get you. We will do everything. We will give away. We will empty our prisons of all the terrorists if we have to get our people back.
Yeah.
But then we will not rest until you don't see sunlight ever again. But we're not just going to flood our own those tunnels and kill people. We're going to do everything we possibly can. This is a deal. The deal that President Trump and Steve Witkoff, his envoy, negotiated after Biden couldn't after a year. They got it done even before Trump came into office. And I did a video we're on a news site called All Israel News. I encourage you to find out about it, allisrael.com. I said, I hate this deal, but I support it. Because if I get captured, don't I want to have some belief after 510, 11, 12, 13 days that somebody's going to keep trying to come get me? You cannot. We're 10 million people. Yeah. And every single person matters. And we cannot break faith with our people. Now, we're getting to the point where we will have gotten as many live hostages as we possibly can out. We think there's 22, 23, 24, 25 maybe left. There's 59 total, maybe 24 that are alive, we think. But we're at a moment that's excruciating for our leadership and for our nation. Why? Because Hamas has an objective. Never give away the last live hostage, because then Israel will be reluctant to come and finish off Hamas. We can't allow Hamas to survive. What is that moment in which there is no more hope for those live hostages? I don't know what that moment is, but the Prime Minister, I think, has, against the criticism of most of the world, has resisted surrender. And when people, many Israelis said, you don't even want these hostages out. Well, of course he does. His older brother, was killed rescuing hostages in Entebbe, Uganda. He himself has been wounded multiple times as a commando rescuing hostages. His family has given their lives for their countrymen. And I have plenty of disagreements with Benjamin Netanyahu. You may as well. But the point is, we've seen him negotiate. We've seen him make a difficult deal to get every hostage we've got. Now, there were people I didn't think were coming out. I'm very grateful. Now, they've got hellish lives ahead of them. but they're out. Now what do we do? And that is that's a very difficult situation. But please, I just no, I won't. We're going to move on to the next person. But I want to thank you for your questions. But I want to say, please remember the compassion of a small country dealing with murderers on 7 fronts, and an administration that was tying our hands for the last 15 of the last 16 months. Now there's a new breath of fresh air. We've got a president who is morally outraged by the fact that Hamas took 2 beautiful babies, 9 months old, 4 years old, red-headed, innocent, and strangled them to death. These are sick people. But if they were still, if those 2 children were alive, we would never flood a tunnel. No, thank you. I appreciate those questions. Yes, sir.
So I saw a stat recently that Israeli forces have killed 13,000 children, and according to a human rights lawyer,
Thank you.
So yeah, I saw a stat recently that Israeli forces have killed 13,000 children, and that according to another article I read, the number of children killed is the greatest number of any conflict in this century. So my question is...
Well, we can rule that out. 1 million children, Jewish children, were murdered by the Nazis. So let's start there. Okay, next.
Well, this century.
Well,
okay. But yeah, I agree.
Okay. We're 25 years in. Let's...
True. So how would you respond to Americans who see what they might call atrocities committed by both sides, and as a way of wanting to keep their hands clean, they just want to stay uninvolved?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, I want to say several things. First of all, my heart is breaking for the Palestinian people. Our ministry, the Joshua Fund, has invested more than $100 million in strengthening the church in Israel, among the Palestinians, and 5 sovereign neighboring Arab countries, as I mentioned, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Egypt over the last 18 years. We have built personal relationships, my wife and me and our team, with all of the Palestinian evangelical leadership. We know Palestinians in Gaza, and our hearts are grieving for them. The Christians, let's start with the Christians. They didn't bring this on. They don't hate Israel. They may have severe disagreements with Israel, and with me personally, and with what I believe. But there are innocents in Gaza. So that's one thing we have to say. Second of all, Jesus teaches us to have compassion, to love our neighbors, and to love our enemies. These are 2 incredibly difficult things to do. I don't know who your neighbors are, but our neighbors are Hamas, but also the people that didn't vote for Hamas, the people that are against Hamas, the people that are being trapped by Hamas and held enslaved by Hamas. So what's the right way to love them? How do you show compassion? Number 3, this is not going to be a clean answer. Number 3, when let's take Columbine. You've got an active shooter, and he's killing children, students. SWAT team comes, seals everything off. What if the mayor says, don't go in? Now, what if it's not a single shooter? What if it's 100 shooters, and they're just killing all the children in the building, and the teachers, and the faculty, and the administrators? How do you stop them? If all the mayors in the area and all the media tell you, you need a ceasefire immediately. Well, duh. But it's not the police that are the problem. It's the murderers in the high school. They're killing everybody. So you start going in. Now, do you want to kill any students? No. Is it possible students are going to get killed in the crossfire? It is. And you take every precaution to keep that from happening? You do. But you've got to stop the shooting. This is the dilemma that we're in. We have a genocidal terrorist organization that knows exactly what they're doing. Okay? Fourth, where are the numbers coming from?
From Vatican News.
Well, yeah, but they're getting it from the Hamas. It's called the Gaza Social Services Ministry. Who's that run by? It's run by Hamas. So now you're taking press releases from the enemy, an enemy that actively says, in every opportunity that they can, that they consider that they want to create more martyrs of their own people. Why? Because it makes Israel look bad. Israel has done more than any army in modern warfare, and you can go far back than just the 25 years. Go back. In fact, during Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech to the U.S. Joint Session of Congress, I was there last summer. He cited one of the leading experts from the U.S. Army College, and who has studied every urban warfare environment in history, in modern history. I don't know exactly how far he goes back. Let's say 100 years or so. And he said Israel has done more to prevent any innocents being killed. And if you look at the numbers of innocents to military-age combatants, we're at about 1-to-1. Whereas the U.S., when we went into Fallujah, multiples of that. Going into Mosul, multiples of that. The Brits going into... So, is it bad? It's horrible. But that's the design of the enemy. That in order to protect ourselves, these are rockets shooting at us night and day. I mean, now it's not that many, almost none, but they're shooting out of what? Out of apartment buildings, out of schools, out of mosques, out of UN buildings, out of playgrounds, out of hospitals. If you bomb the apartment building, you're going to stop the rockets that are trying to kill our people. But then you run the risk of killing their people. So what did we do? We had, knowing this in advance, that who our enemy is, we had made sure that our IDF had the phone number of every single person in every single building, in every single apartment, in every single home in Gaza. Every single one of them. And we called them, and we text messaged them and said, you need to get out because we're going to bomb your building. You have 1 hour. Where in modern warfare do you tell the enemy we're coming? For 3 weeks before we invaded Gaza, right? We'd already lost 1,200 people were slaughtered, more than any day the number of Jews killed since the Holocaust. But we didn't invade. We massed on the border. But for 3 weeks, we told the people of Gaza, exactly where we were coming. We dropped leaflets, giving them exact maps. Go this direction. There'll be food and water and shelter here, 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 here. And what did Hamas do? They blocked the roads, and they shot people trying to leave. These are madmen. So when you physically phone every person in the building, and then you fire rockets at the top of the roof of the building, it's called door knocking is the term, but it doesn't have an explosive. These are rockets that embed into the roof, but it makes the whole building rock. That tells you you have only a couple minutes left. But everyone's been called, everyone's been texted, leaflets have been out there for 3 weeks telling you exactly where to go. We're letting massive amounts of food and medical supplies and water in. It's all being hijacked and stolen by Hamas. But what army sends food and water and supplies and medicine to the enemy? No army does this. So Israel takes every possible precaution to prevent civilian deaths and then to provide ways of escape, and the world sends us to court for genocide. And at a certain point, you're like, look, we're going to get bad press and people are going to hate us, but we only have two options. Let them kill us, or protect ourselves and fight them the most humane way we possibly can imagine. The Americans don't do it this way. The Brits don't do it this way. Nobody does it this way. That doesn't mean you're wrong about a heart of compassion. And we as evangelicals absolutely must have this heart of compassion. And in fact, I would argue, as I shared with some people just a little bit before we had a little reception before we started this, I said, one of my concerns is, as an evangelical, as a Jew, as an Israeli, as an American, as a Zionist, I'm concerned that young evangelicals do not hear from Israelis or Christians who love Israel that we love Palestinians, that we care about Palestinians, that our lives have been decades and millions of dollars have been invested in trying to care for them and make a better life for them. I've met with the second most senior person in the Palestinian Authority at his invitation. I've met with all of the Arab leaders, King Abdullah of Jordan 4 times, President al-Sisi in Egypt 4 times, Mohammed bin Zayed, the man who made peace with Israel from the United Arab Emirates, he's the president, Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince and future king of Saudi Arabia, multiple times. Why? I'm trying to engage Arabs, Muslims. Do these people believe in Jesus? They do not. Are they Zionists? They are not. Do they all have a relationship with Israel? Most of them do not. Well, at every level, pastor, Muslim, cleric, we are trying to engage. And I think it's very important that we who love Israel, and in my case as an Israeli, we lean forward into saying, especially to evangelical young people, we need to have a heart of compassion for Arabs, for Muslims, particularly for Palestinians, and particularly for the people of Gaza. There's not another way to fight this war. Please consider that. But that doesn't mean that the church shouldn't have a foreign policy that's a little bit different from what the governments do. No government is told to love your neighbor, and no government believes in loving your enemy. But this is our mandate from the King of the universe. How do we do it? It's hard. But come on over to Israel, and we'll show you, how hard it is, but how important it is. And I think we're losing some evangelical young people who are struggling, especially in this war. I think they were before this war. Because, and I'll close on this note, I appreciate your guys' time, but this is my favorite question, and I appreciate you asking it. I appreciate you asking it. I think most evangelical young people that the polls are showing are drifting away from a love and support for Israel are doing so because they're going to churches where their parents are very happy about the pastor in the pulpit. However, just because your senior pastor is teaching the Bible and teaching a healthy biblical perspective on Israel doesn't mean that's what the Sunday school class is doing. Doesn't mean that's what's happening in the youth group. That's happening on lots of issues. Marriage, identity, lots of issues. We can't get into them tonight. I think just like Paul says of the gospel, how can they believe if they haven't heard? That's true of all good theology. If you haven't heard good theology about that God considers Israel the apple of his eye, that's your pupil. That's the most sensitive part. That's the way you see the rest of the world. That's the way God sees Israel. Because we're perfect? No. The entire Bible is filled with our dirty laundry. But Jesus was Jewish. Jesus was an Israeli. He came to his own. Now his own received him not. But more and more Jews are coming to faith in Jesus, and that's wonderful. Praise God, and more will. But the point is that many evangelical young people aren't being taught good, healthy theology about God's love and heart for Israel and the Jewish people. But even if they're being taught that, they're not being taught a heart for the Palestinians or for anybody else in the region. And so it can come off as imbalanced and unfair. And when you're watching a war where the media hates Israel and it's just total bias, but they're just showing death and destruction every night for 500 plus days, it's not, should I be upset with young people of any theological persuasion that they don't understand the stakes that we're up against? At least with evangelicals, we hope that we can at least have a biblical conversation and say, all right, Lord, how do we love Israel and the Jewish people? How do we love the Palestinians? How do we specifically love the people of Gaza? That's our heart, and I appreciate you asking that question. I wish we had more time on it, but God bless you. Thank you guys for having me. It's an honor to be with you all tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us this evening. I hope you drive home safely. Have a great evening.